Spider-Man No Way Home and The Flash are two movies that brought back popular superheroes from the past, all the while developing their main character. Both movies feature a hero who just wanted to do good for the people he loved, only to end up wrecking the timeline and making things much more complicated. In this video, I'm going to pit them against each other and see which one of these movies is the better one. Let's get started. Spider-Man No Way Home follows Peter Parker as he gets Doctor Strange's help to fix the problem that was caused by him having his identity exposed by Mysterio. And despite being an intelligent doctor, Stephen Strange decides the best solution here is to erase the world's memory. The spell goes wrong because neither of them thought the process through, and hence Stephen's recklessness along with Peter's idiocracy causes the multiverse to happen. Now, selected few people whose name carry weight for the fandom can appear in the movie, and by people I mean characters. Or do I? Think of it like Pokemon. Get a villain from each Spider-Man movie and at least one of them would work. Thankfully for them, one does work. Green Goblin wreaks havoc once Peter Stingle decides to randomly realize that the villain who has been in that very room for all this while is finally about to do something, even though he was in the same room not causing any problems at the moment. I guess Peter's version of Spidey sense can predict the future as well. Then Green Goblin tricks the supervillains to be on his side, which was logical for Electro, but not so much for Sandman. I guess he forgot he had a daughter and that he just a few scenes ago wanted to go back.
The sooner you guys get through this, the sooner we go home.
Then Green Goblin kills Aunt May with his glider. Shout out to the glider, by the way, for being gentle with her. Instead of stabbing May, the glider decided it was better to just smash her as if they met on Tinder. Aunt May dies, Happy is now sad, and these two, I mean MJ and Ned, are in their kitchen. Ned, after all this time, finally wishes that he could see Peter, although while wearing those sling rings cause the plot demands so. He finds the best version of Spider-Man, then the best version of Peter Parker, and then all of them go meet Tom, who, outside this movie, has been mediocre in both areas. They have an emotional moment where Toby is awkwardly giving his lines while Andrew is on the verge of crying with each dialogue he gets. After Toby's stilted lines and Andrew's melodramatic ones, Tom decides he'd rather fight the villains with their help than stay moping for however long he was going to stay there had these characters not found him. They lay a trap for the villains, and in typical fashion, the mediocre ones come first, aka Amazing Spider-Man villain, then comes the good one, and finally the great one. During this time, Ned screws up the spell, which of course he does. He's able to hack Stark Tech and find and unite 3 Spider-Men, but closing a portal is as hard for him as going to gym. So now they're dragged into the climax to raise the stakes. Things go boom after Doctor Strange comes in. Ned is saved by the cloak, MJ is saved by an almost crying Andrew, Toby is posing without his mask so people know it's him, and Tom is finally getting his rematch with Green Goblin. Only this time he's not holding back, so he's much stronger here. He beats Goblin, and just when he's about to kill the only good villain in his trilogy, Toby swoops in to make sure his legendary villain is not killed by this 3rd edition version of himself. If he wants to kill, he should just kill one of his own villains, not Toby's. Green Goblin, realizing that their Spidey sense is on vacation, stabs Toby and waits for Tom to stab him back. He also makes sure to stay still and not at all fight back when he's being stabbed in the neck. Such a considerate villain. At the end, Tom requests Doctor Strange to cast a new spell where everyone that knew he was Spider-Man forgets him. Everyone he loves and everyone who loves him, which includes Doctor Strange himself, apparently.
I understand that would mean that everyone who knows and loves you, we...
Finally, after all the destruction at the Statue of Liberty, the next day Peter has moved into a new apartment to start from scratch. He makes his own costume and swings for the streets under the snowy light. Toby, at one point in his Spider-Man's life, has probably done this multiple times to look for his MJ. She was pretty commonly found on the streets. Some may say she even belongs there. In The Flash, Barry Allen wants his father to not be sentenced to years in prison after he's already spent years in prison. One day, during a cheesy, emotional flashback, he realizes he can time travel. So he discusses it with Batman. He is advised not to do so. He's warned that the results may be dangerous and even hurt numerous people. Unfortunately, Barry Allen is played by Ezra Miller, and so he decides to do what his emotions dictate. Barry goes back to the past and does the most logical thing, which is to put a can of tomato sauce in his mother's trolley. He is not at all curious about who killed his mother. Why would he? It's not like the movie shows him bound with his mother at all. His mother is clearly not that important, so why should it matter who killed her? Anyway, when traveling back to his own timeline, he's kicked out of the Speed Force, while in the past, he meets his younger self. The young version of him is annoying, especially after he gets his powers and starts flashing everyone. Thankfully, Zod is coming to conquer the world, and so the movie starts to get better. So both Flashes go meet the Batman of this universe. Then they go to save Superman. But since Henry Cavill was either fired or too expensive during the 200 years this movie took to get made, they replaced him with Supergirl. They save her instead, and then in turn, she saves them back in the best one-take shot of this movie. They prepare to fight the Kryptonian and fail. Each time they fail, they go back in time to reset the event just so they can fail again. Sort of like the DCEU. They realize that no matter how many times they reset, it's not going to work. Then past past Barry, who also happens to be a villain in the future, comes to fight with the main Barry and then ends up killing his past self, and hence he kills himself as well. The timeline of this scene makes the timelines from the X-Men movies look linear. At the end, Barry realizes he shouldn't change anything in the past and decides to put the tomato can back in its original place, only to then move the original place up. Once he gets back on his timeline, or what he thinks is his timeline, we find out it's a new universe where George Clooney is the Batman, fitting in for this franchise when you think about it. Overall, both movies have a shitload of plot holes and inconsistency, from Peter Parker's of different movies not immediately reaching Tom's version to Daredevil not showing up for the final battle. Add to that, them missing a huge opportunity by not bringing in James Franco instead of Sandman. Goblin Jr. and Goblin Sr. could have had a complex relationship, and due to Harry being the only character with chemistry with Tobey's version, it would have made the story much more interesting. Just imagine having 3 goblins running around, with each Spider-Man fighting and learning from each other to fight the lunatics. They could have had the original Goblin as the main villain, the bad guy, the Frankist version as the morally conflicted villain, an anti-hero of sorts, who joins the heroes team at the end. Instead, you got Electro, Lizard, and Sandman. So much potential could have been reached here, but they barely scratch the surface. As for the Flash, the ending with very realistic CGI surrounding Flash during the climax alone has too many plot holes. Add to that, Barry ending up in a different universe yet again. To be fair, if we could, we won't mind Ezra or Amber inhabiting a different universe too. Then there are some minor plot holes, as in how did they got home from the lab without getting caught? And of course, the plot hole that annoyed me the most. How is a 70-year-old Batman so strong? You're telling me a 70-year-old non-powered superhero who hasn't been in action for years is all of a sudden strong enough to go against Kryptonian soldiers and not die immediately. Not normal soldiers, mind you, Kryptonian soldiers. These individuals have the power of freaking Superman himself. At least Ben Affleck's version had the kryptonite. Not to mention, the only reason Affleck's version even survived that fight was mainly because Superman didn't want to kill him in the first place.
Stay down! If I wanted it, you'd be dead already.
Now we have the oldest and shortest Batman going up against multiple Kryptonians, including this gigantic one, and he somehow doesn't die right away. Not only that, but he lands some heavy blows. How is this guy faster than a Kryptonian's reflexes? Superman, even at his weakest, is strong enough to break through concrete, yet Batman can survive this slam? I love Batman as much as the next guy, but why does he have to be so overpowered sometimes? At least in the BVS version, he looks intimidating, he looks tough, and he's fairly bulky. He also has kryptonite, and his fighting skills are cool as hell. Here, he looks like rubber half the time. This would have been the perfect movie for Batman to just do sneak attacks like in a horror movie, with us not seeing until the end, like when Affleck's version broke into Luthor's lab and stole the kryptonite. Both movies, despite the efforts, are drowning in plot holes. Despite its rather overcrowded and riddled with plot hole story, No Way Home has the better story, as it keeps Tom's Peter in the forefront and doesn't lose his narrative for the multiple cameos, which is something The Flash tries. The Flash also has its focus on Barry, but No Way Home did a better job despite worse odds, given the fact that he's sharing the screen time with multiple characters that were established in the 2000s and not in the 80s, when most of us weren't even born. Winner, No Way Home. I know separating the character and actor in this case is not that easy, but I think it's for the best because Barry Allen and his character development is the best part of this movie, in my opinion. The story is about him accepting that he has to let go of his grief. The chemistry he has with his mother is well done, and I love the scene where he says goodbye to his mother. Had the movie ended there, or even better, if he had found something that would help his father in the future, it would have been better. Imagine if the writers decided to put something clever in this scene, like if Barry realizes that the tomato sauce was brought in the mall that very morning, and they realized the can couldn't have been at Barry's house during the incident because of it, unless the father brought it, or if there was the footage of the father's car in the mall. So many ways to fix it, yet they decided to ruin their own work by having him make the same mistake, albeit in a smaller scale. To be fair, they do have an end credit scene where it seems he's back in his own timeline talking to Aquaman. I may be getting it wrong, but Arthur did give an Atlantis ring to Barry, and he seems as drunk as in his own movie, if only a bit more. Regardless, they didn't make it clear, so I'm not sure. On the other side, Peter finds out that due to his identity being leaked, him, his friends, and his aunt are being harassed due to mysterious false claims. Because of these allegations, Peter's friends can't get in MIT, so Peter, out of desperation, goes to get help from Doctor Strange, who idiotically comes to the conclusion that erasing the world's memory of Spider-Man is the best solution for this situation.
I'm sorry. Are you telling me that you didn't even think to plead your case with him first before you asked me to brainwash the entire world?
I'm sorry, but what made Strange think his idea was any better? If anything, Strange was the one who came up with the spell idea.
We've used it for a lot less. Do you remember the full moon party at Carmitage?
No.
Exactly.
Hell, even Wong was dumbed down in this version. Anyway, back to Peter Parker. So after they butcher the spell, which leads to villains from other universes coming into this one, and Peter gets his aunt smashed in front of him by one of them, he finally gets a taste of real stakes and loss. Even though I personally don't care about this version of Aunt May, I'll be lying if I didn't feel bad for Peter in this scene. He goes through grief and rage and even lashes out at the older Spider-Man. They calm him down, and in the finale, he overcomes his want to kill Green Goblin and decides to just cure him instead, letting them all go to their own universes. Then the scene that's the biggest tipping of the scale for this competition comes at the very end, when due to Peter's own wishes, everyone forgets who Spider-Man is. This is by far the best ending to any of the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. Not only does he grows and learns, but now he has to start from scratch in an apartment all alone. He even makes his own costume, and I assume he'll get a job too. One of my favorite moments was when he has the chance to tell MJ about everything, but decides to not go through with it. The bit where MJ brushes her hair and the scar is visible is just the cherry on top. The whole scene barely had any dialogue, but portrayed everything it needed to with just reactions. This is the only scene where I thought of Tom as a better actor than Ezra. I know this is going to be controversial, but I think when it comes to acting, Ezra has proven himself as a far better actor than Tom. Keep in mind, I'm talking about acting and not the character of the person. Outside Spider-Man, I've only seen Tom in Uncharted, Devil All the Time, and some scenes of Chaos Walking. He was okay in Uncharted, but felt out of place in Devil All the Time. Tom is a good actor, but Ezra was in 2 movies that really showed his range as an actor. He played a class clown with a heart in Perks of Being a Wallflower. Patrick was a hilarious goofball who somehow contributed brilliantly in a heartfelt movie. When only a few years prior, Ezra played a complete psychopath capable of dangerous mood swings in We Need to Talk About Kevin. It's a shame he ended up being closer to Kevin than Patrick, because otherwise, I genuinely think he is capable of an Oscar-level performance. Now, as for the movies we're discussing here, both Ezra and Tom do a great job for the material they're given. I felt sad for both characters during their emotional scenes, and I'd say most of the time, even the humor worked. I especially was surprised by No Way Home, because I never expected Marvel to strip Tom's Spider-Man out of his technological comfort zone, but they were able to do so, and in such a wonderful manner that I, for once in these movies, truly sympathized with Tom's Peter. Better late than never, I guess, because I thought that Tom's Peter sucked in his other solo outings, especially Far From Home. They made one of the best superheroes into a passive character who did as people told him majority of the time. Only in this movie does he does things by his own admission, regardless of how dumb some of his actions were. At the end, he finally got to live the consequences, and for the first time in years, I'm actually excited for Tom's version of Spider-Man as his own character. At the end, it was the ending that made all the difference for Peter and gave him a pretty big edge over Barry. If they had ended the movie with Barry losing his father to prison and deciding to live with the grim reality, or find a different solution that was missed previously, his character arc and the movie would have been far more satisfying. Sadly, Barry undid almost all that great character development with a single move, and then the movie ended. Also, we still don't know who even killed his mother. It was the biggest mystery of the movie that never got resolved. If anything, I started wondering if the dad did kill her. That would have made for a pretty good twist too. Regardless, the winner of this round is Peter Parker. The Flash had better character development throughout the movie compared to No Way Home, but fell face first at the ending, giving No Way Home the chance to overtake it and score the win. In Spider-Man, we have Aunt May, Happy, MJ, Ned, and Doctor Strange. Later on, they are joined by the older Spider-Man, Tobey and Andrew, who join the movie in the second half. In Flash, we have young Barry, along with Barry's parents, mainly Mom, Iris West, Michael Keaton, Batman, and finally Supergirl. As you can tell, there are many characters, with the standouts being the pre-established ones, like Spider-Man and the older Batman. Let's start with the ones in No Way Home. First off, MJ and Peter's chemistry is at its best in this movie. I personally never cared for the duo until in here. In Homecoming, Peter was dating someone else, then in Far From Home, he's suddenly interested in MJ. We never got to see how he got there. And to make matters worse, MJ in that movie is completely different in terms of personality than in Homecoming. So when it came to No Way Home, I expected it to be my least favorite part there as well. Thankfully, their chemistry was better here. Also, MJ wasn't as forcefully awkward in this movie like she was in Far From Home. Love interest wise, MJ is much better than Iris West, because for one, we see them interact more often and have better chemistry. Iris West was pretty much useless in the movie. Next up, we have Ned. I honestly don't know why this guy is so popular. I personally don't find Ned funny at all. I did not like Ned in Homecoming or Far From Home, and he's the same here. He only gets to use some magic, but that's it. I really can't care less about this character. Despite all this, he is not my least favorite character in the MCU Spider-Man trilogy. That would be Aunt May. May has always come off as an uninteresting character in these movies for me. I can't even remember what it was she did in the first 2 movies. That's how little I care about this character. I only remember her realizing her nephew is Spider-Man at the end of Homecoming, and yet being completely okay with it in Far From Home. Where is the scene in the middle? She's just suddenly fine with it. This Aunt May is a horrible guardian, given how she's fine with her teenage nephew fighting dangerous criminals.
Child endangerment's a nasty rap. A boy was entrusted to you, and as his legal guardian, essentially his mother, you not only allowed him to endanger himself, but you actually encouraged it. Who does that?
I agree with the officer on this one. In the older version of the character, I always thought that Aunt May would make for a loving and caring mother. Only with this version do I think maybe it's better that she doesn't have any children. I felt nothing when she died. I felt sad for Peter, but outside that, I was relieved that one of my least favorite characters from Tom's trilogy is now gone. Next up, we have Happy, whose only contribution to the plot is that he provides an apartment. His apartment is far more useful to the story than him or his romance, fling, with Peter's bimbo aunt. Finally, we have the bigger names. Let's start with Doctor Strange. He was a disappointment. Doctor Strange is one of the characters I really wanted to see interact with the older Spider-Man, especially with Andrew's version. A relatively serious Strange going head-to-head with Andrew's far wittier version of Spider-Man would have made for great interactions. Only, that never happened. Outside that, Doctor Strange was only in this movie for a brief period. He felt more like a plot point than a character. He comes into the story to mess up the universe with Tom, of course. Then his next major scene is when he wants to return the villains to their universes, resulting in a playground fight scene with Spider-Man where he loses humiliatingly. Yeah, the same guy who held his own against Thanos in Infinity War. The same guy who with his clever tactics defeated Dormammu in his origin movie. The same superhero who in the What If version wrecks the whole universe is defeated by Spider-Man. That too in the mirror dimension. I get that Strange here isn't trying to kill Spidey by any means, but come on, this should have been a piece of cake for him. One more thing I've noticed is that plot-wise he is important, but when the movie is over, few people actually even talked about him. Hell, personally, I even forgot he was in the movie until I rewatched it for this video. Like many more, I only remember the Spider-Man. Speaking of which, the Spider-Man were a blast back when I first saw them in the theaters. Now that my nostalgia glasses are gone, do they still hold up? Kind of. Andrew's version was my favorite part of the movie, and in many ways, he still is. He's charismatic as always, and in many scenes, you can see Andrew acting with just his body language, although he does come off a bit mopey at times. Given how Andrew is by far the best actor among the Spider-Man, he's great in the role. He's so good, you almost forget that his Spider-Man movies suck more than half of MCU Phase 4 movies. As for my favorite Peter Parker of all time, Tobey is back and he's so much more awkward in this movie than he's ever been. No, seriously, in a lot of these scenes, he just stands there so awkwardly in the background. It's especially worse when Andrew is moving in the same scenes with so much personality. Tobey has always been the more serious version, but he still had his charm. In this movie, he only has moments of charm. Having said all this, Spider-Man did still carry the nostalgia, and I especially loved it when they interacted with their villains. I also like the web shooter scene where they're surprised that Tobey's webs are organic, although I do think that they could have stretched out that scene a bit more. It happened so suddenly. I feel like they could have added a small 10-15 second scene as a build-up instead of just doing it instantly. Next up, we have characters from The Flash. Now, Ezra's version of The Flash has always been cringe-inducing in the past. The only time he came off as a memorable character was in Zack Snyder's Justice League. Thankfully, his character only gets better here, and one of the characters who helps him in his journey, all the while getting his own arc, is the younger version of Barry. Based on all the reviews I saw for this movie, almost everyone talked about how annoying this character was. I can't see why they thought that, but I must say, while he is loud and reckless, I personally like this character more than I thought I would. He starts off as a spoiled brat, but by the end of the movie, he's matured a lot. He realizes he's been taking things for granted and how he can be really frustrating to deal with, and all that comes from his older version. Because of how exaggerated his mannerisms are, whenever a serious scene happens and he tones down, he suddenly becomes more likable. He may be a brat, but at least he can stop if things get serious. I liked how they used young Barry and his journey in a way to show the Flash's origin story, how he got his powers, what exactly are his powers other than being fast and time travel, although the scene where young Barry finds out that their mom dies should have been longer. I think we could have gotten more reactions out of him. Also, I like how during young Barry's own arc, it's established that he has a crush on Supergirl, only to have him witness her murder over and over again, to the point he starts to lose it, and even gets his own hands dirty. He then risks his life during the battle, and even sacrifices himself at the end, from an annoying ass to a more mature and serious person at the end of the rope, trying to do what's best. He had a pretty good arc, and to my surprise, his character's ending, while confusing, isn't as bad as the main Barry's. It was definitely weird though. Imagine getting killed by your future self while trying to save your alternative future self. Despite the messy climax, this was the biggest surprise of the movie for me. I actually liked this Barry and his character progression, even though the trailers made him look like shit. Next up, we have the parents. The dad is sidelined for the most part, and almost all the focus is on the mom. In fact, he's so forgettable, it took me a while to realize he wasn't even being played by the same actor. It makes me wonder if the whole movie was in an alternative universe, even though Batman is played by Ben Affleck. Oh, and Affleck is basically a cameo in this movie. He's just there for a few scenes in the beginning, and then he's gone. Anyway, let's talk about Barry's mom, Nora Allen. She was good. She's basically the Aunt May of the story, only her chemistry with Barry felt a little cheesy, yet still miles better than anything Aunt May ever did. I was far more emotionally invested in Nora Allen in this one movie than anything Aunt May ever did in all three of the MCU Spider-Man movies combined. The overly touchy Nora Allen is basically a cookie-cutter sweet mother character who only exists in the story for Barry's arc, and while her screen time was limited, she did the best she was given. I especially love the final scene of her as Barry says goodbye to her and repeats the same words that represent their relationship best.
I love you so much. I love you too. I love you more. I loved you first. Love you more. I loved you first.
I really like this moment between them. This was the last time Barry would see his mother alive, and both actors did a fantastic job. Finally, we have Supergirl and Batman. Supergirl was fine. She was there for the action scenes and a quick change of heart, nothing more, nothing less. I enjoyed her character, but didn't miss her when she was gone. Although, to her credit, she at the very least has better chemistry with both the Barrys than Iris West ever did. If anything, Supergirl and the Flash unintentionally have better romantic chemistry than some actual couples in superhero movies.
It's not him. We've got to go.
Wait, we can't just leave her here. Look at her.
I got you. I've got you. I'm glad you're okay. When you found me in that hole that they put me in, and I wasn't Kal-El, why did you help me?
Because you needed help.
Do you know what this symbol stands for?
Means hope, right?
I will help you fight Zod.
Compare all that to the most chemistry Iris and Barry had in the movie.
You should ask me to dinner.
Now, let's talk about Batman. There was a lot of excitement going on for Michael Keaton's Batman, and while I can see why, I personally wasn't as hyped. His Batman movies came way before I was born. I had seen the Dark Knight trilogy, the DCEU Batman, and even some animated Batman movies before I got to Keaton. I like his Batman movies, but had zero nostalgia for them. As a matter of fact, when I think of the actor Michael Keaton, I don't even think of Batman. I think of Birdman. So for me, he wasn't all that special. The actor, as expected, did a good job with the lines he was given, but I couldn't help but feel like he could have been replaced by any actor and his character wouldn't stand out. In No Way Home, they don't just bring in the other versions and leave it at that. They explore their lives as well. They talk about Toby's past and how his relationship with his MJ is complicated. They give Andrew a chance to save someone the way he wished he had saved his Gwen. They both even share the tragedies in their lives in order to help Tom's version cope with his. They try a scene like that in The Flash too, but then end up using the most generic of the moments.
I lost my parents, but that pain made me who I am. I'm not sure I know who I am without it, actually.
Literally, every Batman has had his parents killed. Keaton's isn't special. If you're like me and haven't seen any of Keaton's Batman movies in almost a decade, there's nothing for you here but some old costumes. How much you like the side characters in these movies depends on how much nostalgia you have for each cameo. I grew up with Spiderman. The Batman versions I like are Christian Bale, Affleck, and Pattinson. Never cared much for Keaton, Kilmer, and especially Clooney and West. If we are talking about the side characters that were not cameos from other franchises, like the main characters, close friends, and relatives, then The Flash wins. However, if we only include the cameos, then No Way Home wipes the floor with The Flash. Now we get to the most disappointing part of each movie. There's a total of 8 villains in these 2 movies, and almost all of them sucked. I say almost because when you have 8 villains, 1 or maybe 2 are bound to stand out among the trash. In Spider-Man, we have multiple villains, but only one matters. Green Goblin is by far the best villain in No Way Home. Doc Ock starts off like an angry grandpa. Electro, Sandman, and Lizard are just wasted. Not only that, but Sandman especially has his whole motive. His whole thing is that he wants to be with his daughter.
I just want to go home.
But then fights Spider-Man and tries to stay? Why? What did he plan on doing in this universe? With Electro, at least he had a reason to stay. He liked the energy in this universe, and like an addict, didn't want to quit. Lizard was there. That's pretty much all his contribution to the story. He was in some action scenes where once he left the screen, you forget he was even there. At the end, we have Green Goblin. He was great. He was the only saving grace for the villain. William Dafoe was as incredible as ever. Unlike other villains who were just there for some action scenes, Goblin was there to wreak havoc in Spider-Man's life. He kills Aunt May, destroys the apartment they were living in, manipulates the villains, and even toys around with Peter during the final battle, taunting him the whole time. My only issues with this character were the inconsistencies, like when he's about to wipe the floor with Spider-Man earlier, but here in the climax, he's getting beaten rather easily. Outside that, he was fun. He was nowhere near as good as in the OG Spider-Man, but he was still a blast to watch in this movie. However, I still do think that instead of bothering with Electro, Lizard, and even Sandman, they could have just brought the Goblin character. Imagine 3 different Spider-Man fighting 3 different goblins. I would have loved to see Franco's Goblin interact with Defoe's. Imagine the storyline where Defoe's Goblin and Franco's Goblin argue about killing Spider-Man. One of Franco's Goblin's main motivation to kill Spider-Man is because he thinks Spidey killed his dad. Now having his dad not only be alive but also a psychopath would have created some interesting conflict between father and son. I can also picture Dan DeHaan's goblins seek a father figure in Defoe, and they team up to fight Toby's Spider-Man alongside Tom's to get their hands on the magic box so that they can control the other villains. A group of villains versus a group of heroes, but this time with a lot more complexity. A father-son brawl where neither wants to kill the other. Franco's goblin teaming up with not just one but 3 Spider-Men. Goblin v Goblin. Goblin versus Goblin. I would have jizzed my pants if I saw Franco's Harry team up with Andrew's Spider-Man to help Tom and Toby to fight against the Force and Dan's Goblin. Oh yeah, that would have been so good. Then again, that would make the movie more about Toby's Spider-Man, I guess, than Tom's. So I can see why this storyline will probably never happen, even though the whole reason this movie is even going to be remembered in the long run is because of the other Spider-Man in it. Sorry, Tom. In Flash, we have General Zod and his henchwoman, Fiora something. These were the villains I was excited to see the most in the Flash movie. And boy, did they feel useless here. Zod is only here to conquer. The whole saving Krypton for his species is just a throwaway line. The only intimidating thing he does in this movie is when he tells Supergirl that he killed an infant Superman, then proceeds to kill Supergirl over and over again. Zod is still the best villain in the entire DCEU and one of my favorite supervillains in general. But he's so bland and uninteresting here. Hell, he's not even much of a threat here outside killing Supergirl. The only reason he isn't killed immediately is because of plot armor. In an earlier scene, Barry alone knocks out a Kryptonian, and it even seems like he may have killed the soldier. So what's keeping him from using the same move on Zod later on? They really shat upon the Kryptonians here. Barry, no matter how fast, should not be able to land a punch on any of the Kryptonian soldiers without breaking his hand. Young Barry even kills Zod's henchwoman in an instant when he gets a piece of Kryptonian metal. Despite how they underused Zod, at least he was causing some chaos and maintained his original goal from Man of Steel. His henchwoman, who was also a great and intimidating character in Man of Steel, is just useless here. She was so cool in Man of Steel, yet she is in this movie just for the sake of it. I don't think she even got to say a single line in this movie before dying. They had 2 villains with great potential in the Flash and just wasted it.
Look how they mess with my boy.
In summary, almost all villains except for Green Goblin suck. Winner, No Way Home. You know, even though they wasted Zod's character, at the end it still felt like Michael Shannon was less replaceable as Zod than Michael Keaton was as Batman. Just a thought. When it comes to the visual aesthetic, both these movies have only a handful of moments when it worked, but when it did work, it worked out well. Although there were times when the uncanny valley kept pushing me out of the movie. In No Way Home, there were plenty of bad CG and obvious green screen moments, but it also had a decent long take. Sadly, it's nowhere near as memorable as the hard not to notice archive footage from older Spider-Man movies. From Sandman to Lizard, the reuse of those shots was so in your face. Even if you don't remember those movies, it's still noticeable since outside those shots, they barely have any scenes. Toby Spider-Man doesn't talk to Sandman the way Andrews does to Electro. Thankfully, there were some great shots like the final swing that Tom Speeder takes in the snow, or when all 3 Spider-Men swing together while their team plays. While No Way Home had some off-putting moments visually, it doesn't hold a candle to the brain aneurysm that was the CG in The Flash. First off, Ezra Miller has a face that looks like CG even when it is real. Like in this shot. Like, is this real or did they go out of their way to make him look worse? I guess they were not lying when they said the CG was bad on purpose. But I was only expecting that comment to be true in the Speed Force, since those scenes required a lot of CG. I was not expecting it for over half the movie. One of the things that bugged me, other than fake Ezra sharing the screen with the real one, is that Flash's head, while in gear, looks so freaking big at times. No Way Home doesn't have the best visuals among the Spider-Man movies. That title easily goes to the Spider-Verse movies. But at least it doesn't have painful to sit through CGI, whether it's intentional or not. Not to mention, the mirror scene provided a lot of creativity and great spectacle. And the final scene that consists of all but reactions is just perfect. Winner, No Way Home. As for the action, I found Flash a bit more creative at that. It didn't help the movie enough, however, due to its lack of logic. Not to mention, most of the action pales in comparison to Flash's own scene in Zack Snyder's Justice League. How did we get from such a creative scene to this? It felt like watching Age of Ultron's Quicksilver after watching Days of Future Past version of Quicksilver. It's still passable, but could have been so much better. No Way Home, on the other hand, had only a handful of good action scenes. My personal favorite was Peter's fight with Goblin as he wipes the floor with him. I also found the fight with Doctor Strange fun too. It lacked on stakes, but made up for it with creativity. The most disappointing fight, however, was at the end. The whole climatic battle came and went so quickly. It was still better than the embarrassingly irritating final battle of The Flash. To me, the most table-flippingly annoying scene in The Flash came here. Barry kills Kryptonian with his bare hand. Are you serious? Are you seriously telling me that Barry is able to knock out several Kryptonians with his bare hands without breaking a single bone or his fingers? At this point, why even have Supergirl fight Zod? Just have the Barrys deal with them. Seriously, what problem do they have with Kryptonians? Both Barrys manhandle several of the superpower soldiers. Then we see a 70-year-old old, past his prime, no superpower vigilante knock out a gigantic Kryptonian. Somehow, the weakest member of this team was Supergirl herself, who kept getting beaten and killed over and over. Also, Barry's speed was very inconsistent in the battle. He's fast enough to make tornadoes and even run all over the place full of supervillains, but at the same time, he struggles to get to his feet to save Supergirl from being stabbed. Even in the very beginning of the movie, he stops his super speed while saving the babies and almost gets everyone killed from falling debris. Why? Why did he switch to normal speed when his super speed would have been significantly more helpful? It didn't make any sense. You can't just establish such an important fact within the universe and not expect some questions or irritation. Barry taking down multiple Supermen felt as dumb as when they had the God of Thunder get tased in Ragnarok. The logic in Flash was enough for me to almost not give any points. The scene where Supergirl saves everyone was by far the best scene action-wise for me, but there was little else that the Flash had in terms of great action. No Way Home may not have great action throughout the movie, but at least it didn't insult its audience the way The Flash did. Neither movie has truly great action, but No Way Home wins due to it being less nonsensical, especially at the end. Not to mention, the mirror dimension alongside the final fight had some pretty cool moments, even if they made Doctor Strange weaker for the weakest Spider-Man to appear strong. Winner, No Way Home. The fan service, for all the great it did, also took me out of the movie every now and then, especially when it went far above and beyond. Now you may find the nostalgia help No Way Home's pacing, but coming from someone who had lots of nostalgia for No Way Home, but little to no nostalgia for The Flash, I found myself enjoying the movie nonetheless. I enjoyed the movie almost the same whether Batman was on screen or not. In No Way Home, time flew by for me much faster when the older Spider-Men were on screen compared to when it was just Tom. The movie especially felt slow in the beginning when the movie spent time with Peter and his friends. A childish brat version of the Flash was somehow still able to hold my attention better than three high schoolers struggling to get into MIT in a Spider-Man movie. To make matters worse, the whole police interrogation scene and Tom's Peter being a public enemy concept was just wasted. They brought Matt Murdock in and basically hoped that the audience is distracted from the fact that when it comes to legal procedures, there won't be much in terms of consequences for Peter again. That immediately drained any enjoyment out of the first act of the movie. It only picked up when Doc Ock showed up. My nostalgia for Tobey's villains are far greater than Andrew's, so whenever the movie gave screen time to Electro and Lizard, I was mostly uninterested. I didn't even care for Sandman in this movie, who somehow knows about Goblin.
They both died, fighting Spider-Man.
With Doc Ock, I can understand since he did get pretty famous in Spider-Man 2, but how come he knows about Green Goblin being Norman Osborn? Sandman seems to have arrived in this universe after the events of Spider-Man 3, so maybe Norman's Goblin identity was revealed later on in that universe, especially after they found Harry Osborn using a similar gadget. But then, how did Doc Ock know? He dies way before the events of Spider-Man 3. Only people who knew at that point were Harry, Peter, and the butler. Did that butler talk about his boss's secret in some online forum? AITA for not telling my boss's that Spider-Man didn't kill his daddy. Some of the villains don't even feel like the same character. Electro, for one, is very different here. And I don't just mean his looks. Even the way he speaks is different.
I myself don't want to be killed, especially if I got dressed like Dungeons and Dragons, so...
This Electro character is far more sassy. He went from the awkward nerd in his own movie
You're late.
Talking trains are so slow, sir.
to straight up Anthony Mackie in interviews.
You could do a rap battle again with Eminem, would you do it?
Of course I would. I'm not scared of no Eminem. He can't mess with me.
Jamie Foxx is an amazing actor, so it's not his fault that his character changed so drastically. But it still exists within the movie, and it kept distracting me every time he spoke. Also, since they put the trailer to Multiverse of Madness at the end of this movie, I really thought Strange was going to get in trouble due to his actions in this movie. But nope, no consequences for him at all. Add to that, the sheer number of plot holes and forced memes really annoyed me.
You know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
This line felt so forced here, unlike the Spider-Man pointing meme, which was done actually well. As for the plot holes, they kept getting worse and worse with each rewatch. Tobey and Andrew are way too chill when they enter the scene through a magic portal. Andrew barely even reacted to it. It might as well had been a door to him. And what the hell were they doing all this time anyway? If a mentally challenged supervillain can find Tom's Peter, why can't Prime Spider-Man? How come they attack each other when they meet for the first time and then carry on like nothing? What was all that about? Also, aren't all the villains being sent to the timelines they die in? Won't not having the powers result in them still dying anyway? Doc Ock had already built the collider, so he'll just end up destroying it anyway, won't he? Why is Sandman ready to abandon his daughter and team up with other villains all of a sudden? Also, why were Electro and Tom Hardy's Venom in this movie to begin with, since neither knows who Spider-Man is? Electro was so useless, even though for a second there I thought he could have done some serious damage. He was able to throw Doc Ock out of the apartment with a single hand. Dr. Octavius, you know, the character who had a horrible horror villain type vibe in his own movie, Electro manhandled him with a single hand, and then he never got to that level of a threat. Even his defeat was so quick and anticlimactic at the end. His potential was never reached. Now once back in his universe, Goblin is probably no longer going to be a villain. Hence Hattie won't be a villain either. So what happens in that universe now? Are Goblin and Spidey from that universe going to team up? So many questions and plot holes and missed opportunities that it disrupts the whole narrative of the story. Also, throughout the movie, I was wondering, where is Mysterio? I really thought he faked his death in the last movie, since he never passed on the Edith glasses. He revealed Spider-Man's identity and then that's it? I don't believe for a second that he actually died, yet the movie only ever mentioned him in the beginning. Also, No Way Home had some dialogues that didn't make any sense, like when Doc Ock says,
Leave them. They're mine.
Electro replies,
I don't need your help.
and I was like, what kind of reply is that? He didn't ask if you wanted help. He demanded that you hand over the Spider-Man to him. Then there's this line.
Sad to tell you, Sandman, nobody's going home.
For a moment there, I thought the villains themselves also have at least some conflict within them. Yet that was never realized by the end, which makes me wonder, what was even the point of that line? The Flash also has its own plot holes, from minor ones like when Barry uses his normal speed to fight his younger self instead of knocking him out instantly, to some major ones, like when they show the future past Barry hunting main Barry and then killing his past self in the process, even though he wouldn't exist because of it, therefore no one could have kicked main Barry out into his past self's timeline. Yeah, this was not confusing or annoying at all. I'll take a dozen past Barry and his shenanigans over a finale like this. I love time travel stories, but absolutely hate the whole alternative timeline crap. They did a similar thing in Endgame too, and I have expressed exactly how I felt about it in my Endgame vs Days of Future Past video. I far prefer the traditional style of time travel stories, where you change something in the past and it affects the future, which only works to raise the stakes compared to these alternative universe stories, where the whole time travel device is switched into the multiverse one. Even if they wanted to change things for the sake of the story, why couldn't they just adapt the Flashpoint storyline like the animated movie with just some minor changes? That movie did a far better job than either of these two. Although I'll admit I did like the flashback where Barry saves the child during the climax of Man of Steel. It made sense why he wasn't able to save many people since he only got those powers a few days ago. The Flash, despite some cheesy and on the nose moments, overall had a faster pace for me. The humor was a big help too.
How hard do you have to hit someone to make them forget stuff? If I hit you in the past, will it hurt me in the future? Wait.
How much do you weigh?
180.
Although it did not always land.
I know sex exists, I've just never experienced it.
Even though Barry's mother didn't have much screen time, I did like the little moments throughout the movie that showed how much young Barry took his mother for granted, all the while main Barry misses her.
Reason? You used monkey as a dartboard! Wait, what? Why is your place so much nicer than I expected it to be? Oh, you like it? Mom had to help decorate. You know Mom. Right, yeah. Classic Mom. Classic Mom.
As I've stated before, it's been a while since I watched Batman 89, so most of the fan service from that movie went right over my head. I remembered some of the Keaton Batman movies, but not a lot, so fan service didn't help the pacing of The Flash to me, since I'm barely a fan to begin with. And even the references that I did get were such that could have been from any Batman, not specifically from Keaton, like here.
And an Alfred. My Bruce has an Alfred.
Every one of the Batman on screen has had his own Alfred. This doesn't make Keaton stand out by much. His most memorable moments were his Batcave and the Supergirl rescue set piece. On the opposite side, most of No Way Home memorable moments are just fan service from the older Spider-Man. The only scene that stood out to me outside fan service was at the end, when Peter decides not to tell MJ and Ned about himself. Whereas in the Flash's case, the moments I remembered most only had some Keaton. Surprisingly enough, I found the annoying Barry and his transformation into a more serious character more memorable. I personally loved this moment when young Barry is screamed at by main Barry. Then after main Barry apologizes, young Barry actually admits how obnoxious he can be and lets him be. I was not expecting him to actually show a more mature side like this. It was a nice moment between both Barrys and makes you realize that while he is a loud teenager, he's not immune to understanding when things get serious. He's actually open to admitting his flaws, which made his character more likable from this scene onwards and added a new layer to him. Keaton's Batman is basically a retired badass coming back to action for one last time. A better example of this type of character arc, whether as a mentor or as an old badass returning for some action, was done in both Spider-Verse movies, Skyfall, and The Dark Knight Rises. That's how you show an old character develop despite being past his prime. As is, the pacing in both movies is constantly interrupted by either plot holes, in-your-face fan service, or awful CGI. Despite all that, if I have to pick one movie where I didn't feel the time drag, I'd have to pick The Flash, since despite the awful CG, at least I enjoyed the humor, the heart, and especially the origin story that was told. Main Barry mentoring young Barry and realizing how annoying he himself can be was good, but him seeing young Barry get serious and even being capable of taking lives added a new layer to both of their characters. Spider-Man also had that, but while Tom is stopped from killing, young Barry isn't. Main Barry's reactions to how far young Barry was going really showed how things were getting out of hand. It was one of the few saving graces for the final battle in The Flash. Winner, The Flash. I really think the Flashpoint cartoon would have made for a much better story had they adapted it. Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Batman would have been much more entertaining to watch in this universe than Keaton, in my opinion. Young Flash could still exist so that the story isn't too similar to the animated counterpart, all the while having Wonder Woman and Aquaman as villains. Having Wonder Woman kill Mera would have been even more satisfying in live action. Despite all that, what we did get wasn't necessarily terrible either. For all their flaws, I did enjoy both these movies. Barry's character development was great, and if not for the ending, he would have easily won. While his ending was a letdown, Tom's was incredible and finally made him the Spider-Man I always wanted him to be. Having Tom's Spider-Man finally mature and go through consequences was extremely satisfying. This Spider-Man finally hit his rock bottom. It felt like a clean slate for his character and changed how I saw this version of the character, this version of Spider-Man. Both are fun movies and far better than the garbage like Multiverse of Madness and the Loki TV show. Having said that, neither of these two movies truly reaches their potential either. They're just nice to pass some time. Nothing I'll remember for years to come. It's time for the scores. The Flash gets a 6 and No Way Home gets a 7. Thank you for watching, guys, and I'm sorry that for the past 2 years I haven't uploaded any videos. In case you're wondering why I vanished for this long, I have been writing novels. My debut novel is a psychological thriller that takes place mostly in an apartment building between two vastly different families. It has everything from grief, trauma, to violence and gore. It's been published for a few months now, so if you're interested in a dark, disturbing thriller with morally conflicted characters, do check it out. I plan on making more videos going forward, and this time I'm actually going to do it. Making videos take anywhere from a week to a month. Add to that all the delays caused by copyright claims make it extra hard, so please be patient. Let me know if you like this video and stay tuned for my next versus video, or maybe this time it'll be a video essay. Either way, see you in the next video. Bye.